Well, good afternoon, everyone. If I was given the choice of timing, it wouldn't be just after lunch with no coffee, but okay. Happy to be here and particularly delighted with this subject. We've got a very high-powered crowd here. I want to start with, I think, setting the stage. Maureen? Here we go. So the purpose that we've got in this session is really to talk about the future of biologicals with the objective of helping you all understand why to believe in a positive future for biologicals. From here, I'm going to introduce myself just briefly and then give you some background on biologicals or on the industry. And then I'm going to turn it over to the panel to each introduce themselves and who they represent. So just in the way of background that's pertinent to biologicals. So I've been consulting for 20 years. I'm with Context Network. We're 100% focused on ag and food, and biologicals are a very significant sector for our consulting. I did previously manage North America, Latin America, and the global biologicals business for Sumitomo. I also led the acquisition that became Valent Biosciences. And I've long seen real value in biologicals for both crop protection as well as soil and crop enhancement. So I thought that might be useful to share that. Then by the way of just a brief, pertinent background on biologicals, I've got a couple items here about California, a couple about the United States, and a couple global that I'd like to share with you. First, no surprise, California is the #1 state for tree, fruit, nut, vine, and vegetables, and also for biocontrol use. So biocontrol products are largest here in California from anywhere in the U.S. California does have a climate scoping plan that they implemented or passed last year. It sets a goal of expanding organic agriculture to 20% of cultivated acres by the year 2045. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the Q&A. Now thinking globally, if you will, the organic market, organic produce market, organic crop market, is captive and very strong for biologicals. Only biologicals can compete for crop protection and crop enhancement in that organic segment. However, the market for biologicals in conventional production is much larger than the organic segment, and I think that's important to recognize and realize. The U.S. market for biologicals, we peg it at $1.8 billion and growing at 10% compound annual growth rate. You'll see different numbers from different sources. We think this is the right number, but I fully will tell you that it's not the only number that's out there. We expect biologicals are going to reach 35% of the total crop protection and crop enhancement market by the early 2030s. Please don't hold me to a certain time, but we think it'll be in the first half of the 2030s. I think it's important to recognize that regulation is becoming more favorable. I draw attention to Brazil, who's now fast-tracking biological registrations. And certainly the EU Farm to Fork Initiative is providing a strong incentive to adopt biologicals. They could use some more regulatory registration improvements, but that's certainly driving a lot of interest and attention. And then I think I'd be remiss if I didn't call out efficacy or performance of the products. There is a perception by both growers and retail, and my own firm has surveyed this multiple times, that biological efficacy lacks synthetic products, and this really does need to be overcome. With that, let me turn it over to each of the panelists to introduce themselves and who they represent. Corey, why don't you start, and we'll go right down the line.
Okay, thank you, Mike, and thanks for hosting the event, Agri-Pulse and Sarah, it's really a pleasure to be here. A little bit of my background just for introduction. My name is Corey Huck. I head up our biologicals unit for Syngenta, which you may also know Valagro, which is a company we acquired a few years ago. That's a really big part of our biological strategy. My background was mostly in the crop protection, and I would say I'm a convert. So I started, actually I grew up on a farm in Nebraska and still active in that farm. And I worked for most years in crop protection, and I left in 2015, left Syngenta at the time, and went out and got some experience in a couple different areas, one around synthetic biology and understanding what impact that could have on agriculture. And then did a stint in venture capital as well as investing in early stage startup companies and really getting some of the science out of the lab and onto the farm, and how do we do that more effectively in agriculture. So I had a couple of years of doing that, and then I had the invitation back to Syngenta to start a division within Syngenta. As we know, it's a big crop protection and a big seed company, to really start this biologicals unit to round out its portfolio. And seeing the future and the challenges with climate change and plant health and soil health becoming more important, how do we position ourselves with the right science, the right sustainability, and the right portfolio to give growers better options in biologicals? So that's a little bit of a background for me. When I say just a little bit of definition for biologicals within the Syngenta realm, we kind of see it in three areas. Biocontrols, I think we'll talk more about this. Biocontrols, as Mike just said, biostimulants, and really around plant health, how do you have plants more healthy to overcome biotic stresses. And then the third one is biofertilizers or nutrient use efficiency, bionutrition. So those are kind of the three large categories that we really look when we talk about biologicals within Syngenta. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Corey, and thank you, Mike, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Agri-Pulse, for this opportunity. My name is Amy O'Shea. I'm the president and CEO of Certis Biologicals. I joined Certis in February of 2020. Prior to that, I was with a company called FMC Corporation for about 23 years, and my experience covered everything from what we refer to lovingly as the non-crop side of things, so turf and ornamental, pest control, in sales and marketing, through to stints in our industrial chemicals business, health and nutrition, food ingredients, pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals, and then my last 3 years, I was the vice president of the North America ag business. I joined the Certis group in February of 2020, so it was quite an interesting time period to join the team. I joined February 10th, and I think we shut down the office within 30 days, so it was quite a wild ride joining the team. I've been with them now for a little over 3 years. Certis, for those of you who don't know us, we are a wholly owned subsidiary of Mitsui & Company, a Japanese trading company, but we are basically operate independently. We are dedicated and focused on the development, research, regulatory registration, commercialization of biological crop protection products. As Corey mentioned, we look at the products in the same type of categories, biopesticides, so those that perform control versus biostimulant, plant stimulation, and nutrition. Most of our experience is in the crop protection side of biopesticides. As I mentioned, we're based here out of the United States. However, we are actually a global company. So we're headquartered in Columbia, Maryland, but we sell in 55 countries around the world and have probably one of the broadest portfolios of biopesticide products. We do distinguish ourselves a bit because we manufacture our own products. We have 2 manufacturing facilities here in the United States, actually, and a joint venture for plant extraction in India. In fact, one of our signature manufacturing sites is actually located in California. We're in Kern County in Wasco, California. So those of you from Bakersfield are probably pretty familiar with Wasco. And thank you very much.
Thank you. First, I want to say thanks for having me here today. I'm Lisa Safarian. I'm the President and Chief Operating Officer for Pivot Bio. My background is I spent 32 years at Monsanto, seed, crop protection, and then a couple of years at Bayer after Bayer bought Monsanto. The last 5 or 6 years, I was a North America lead for our whole portfolio. As Corey said, I'm a bit of a convert to biologicals, given my long background from where I've come from. I left Bayer at the end of 2020, and then I joined the Pivot Bio board. And being on the board, I saw, what I think is just such a fantastic technology and an amazing future for biologicals, and obviously specifically for Pivot Bio. So I joined a year ago, actually, as their Chief Operating Officer to move things forward. We were founded in 2011 by Carson Timmie and Alvin Tamsier. We're still a startup, but I would call us more of a pre-commercial, later stage startup. We have launched 5 products since 2018. We're primarily in corn, but we're also in wheat and small grains. And essentially what our product is Alvin and Karsten tried to figure out how could you develop self-fertilizing cereal crops so that they could get their fertilizer, their nitrogen from microbes instead of synthetic fertilizer. And that's exactly what they've done. So our product today is microbe-driven. Our product for corn, we call Proven 40, replaces 40 pounds of synthetic nitrogen on each acre, which is roughly 20% of what normally goes on that acre. And you have similar yields then after you replace that synthetic nitrogen. And what's exciting about this particular technology is it allows the farmers to get away from dependence on synthetic fertilizer. It's a more consistent form of nitrogen that feeds the crop, and it's got really great sustainability benefits. So for example, for these particular microbes that we've developed, they have 2% of the emissions that come with a normal synthetic fertilizer production. They don't go into the air as nitrous oxide, which is a really big problem from a greenhouse gas perspective, and they don't leak into water. So they don't go into water and they don't form nitrates in the water. So from a sustainability perspective, it's incredible. And at the same time, it's providing great value to the farmer as he has different ways to provide this nitrogen that feeds the crop through the whole season. So even in terrible weather, regardless of his farming practices, it often saves that second trip where you might apply more nitrogen as the cropping season would go forward. Well, I'll go ahead and stop there. I could talk all day about it. It's very exciting, but yeah. So as we think about biologicals, again, a new space for me personally. I'm excited to talk about why we think there's a great future in biologicals.
Thank you, and thank you also for inviting me. I'm Jason Garbell with Novozymes. I'm not sure who knows Novozymes or not. We're a mainly B2B company, the world's largest industrial biotech, and kind of all over the world. You name it, we're there, including in Davis, California. Lots of different industries. You don't know that you use our products or the products made by our products. So when you fill up your gas with renewable fuels, which are part of the requirements, our products go into making that. When you buy bread at the supermarket, you probably use our stuff to keep the bread soft. When you wash your clothes, when you buy animal products, we are involved in animal health and nutrition. Now we're involved in probiotics. And then the area I'm in is agriculture, which is to me very exciting. Have a chance to work with many of the folks up here. Pretty exciting for Novozymes. We're merging with Christian Hansen, so that will hopefully go into effect later this year or early next year. Pretty exciting. We're the world's largest enzyme company. We're very good at enzymes, and we're great at enzymes. We're good at microbes. I think they're great at microbes. So really exciting to come together here. We're very excited about the future. Me, who am I? And I don't even know how I ended up on the stage. I'm originally a lawyer, yikes, but have a technical background. Expated to Denmark and was overseeing our patent department. And when I was heading back, had a reflection like I did not want to be a lawyer anymore. Not sure if that's possible. Most of you may agree it may not be possible, but came back, and that's when I joined agriculture for Novozymes. We had rolled up a lot of companies into one and decided to go to more of a Novozymes partnering model. Ended up forming partnership with Corey's company on a biofungicide, and then formed and managed the alliance with Lisa's former company, the Bioag Alliance. Now my role is overseeing, we have 2 business portfolios, one on our commercial products, and I oversee, luckily, our pipeline back to my roots of technology, where we're focused on biocontrol, very exciting, and then also on fertilizer replacement. We're a bit far behind you guys. But honestly, we failed in the Bioag Alliance. I'm not sure if you heard, but we spent a lot of money. We failed in terms of we didn't deliver exactly what we wanted to accomplish with transformational products. That word's thrown around a lot. But what we did is we got great learnings and putting that into what we're doing today to raise the bar on biologicals. And I think you'll hear my comments on where I think and have some optimism versus some of the reality as well too. But great to be here with everybody.
Very good. Thank you, panel. So I've got a number of questions that I'm going to be asking, but I am counting on questions from the audience using your Slido, and I'll try to keep track of those. And I'm going to direct at least the first number of questions to specific individuals and hope that that gives us the background that we're looking for. If anybody feels like they want to expand on something particularly, just make your interest known. The first question I've got is for you, Jason. How do you see the economic feasibility of California's organic goals? And further, how does or might that regulatory environment in California challenge or benefit others around the country or otherwise?
Yeah, so I try to be a pragmatist when I look at biologicals, so you'll hear some opinions that will maybe surprise you for somebody whose career depends on biologicals. But when I look at the very ambitious goals of California, as a pragmatist today, if I take a snapshot, I'm a little daunting. How are we going to get there? How can we do that? It's a little bit scary. If I step back and look at the equation, though, on the other side is the planet. And so we have to be ambitious. We're not going to get there by setting little goals and baby steps. We're going to have to be ambitious. And I think California, in a number of areas, is doing that. So you have an equation that's difficult on the left side, but the right side, it's important enough for us to do this. I see the future of biologicals as very promising. I think today there's some challenges, but I see the right investments going in, your companies as well too. So I think we're going to get there. For organics, though, I think that the definition of organics may need to change. And I think you can change it without not accomplishing the goals of organics in terms of healthier products, less residues, how things are made. So I think we can do that, but I do think as we want to raise the bar, as you mentioned, maybe the only way to get there could be with biologicals. We're going to have to make these things better, and so we're going to have to do things that are a little bit differently than we are the past 10, 20, 30 years. And so that's why I think organics may need to have a different definition to get us there. Not easy, there'll be lots of opinions on it, but I think there's a possibility to get there with the technology, but I think we'll have to be ambitious and see if we make it there and adjust on the fly.
Thank you. The next question's for Amy, and it triggers on some of the things that Jason just mentioned. So around the globe, there is a difference in the products that are currently included in the biologicals market. And examples of this are copper, sulfur, PGRs, spinosad. The question is there a need for regulators and industry to align and standardize the definition? And if yes, how would you recommend making it happen?
Thank you, Mike. And I just want to tag on to something that Jason said because I think it's pertinent to this. I think when we think about organics versus conventional, it's almost like an all or nothing, right? You either have to be organic or you have to be conventional. And I think the question poses the concept or the vernacular of biologicals is actually broader than just products that fit very neatly and nicely into this organics definition. And so I think every country is evaluating the swath of products that fall under this umbrella biologicals. And each country in and on its own is creating the divisions and assigning the nomenclature. It's only important because it's linked to regulatory framework, right? It's only important because it's linked to certifications and the ways in which products are chosen or decided that they're okay to be used. I think how, is that evolving and should it evolve? Yes, I think it begins to evolve more naturally as the consumer demand pulls for more softer chemistries or lower impact products, and as governments and industries start to invest more money. I think the only way in which it is going to come to some type of at least commonality is through partnership across industry, agencies, associations, advocacies, having structured forums like this where you can have conversations. We see industry associations like CropLife here in the United States, BPIA in the United States, IBMA in Europe, they're doing a lot to try and define what these products are and how they can be best fit along those regulatory lines. I mean, IBMA recently just submitted for legislation the actual definitions that go alongside of these biologicals, so as to ensure that every member country is registering these products in the same way and moving these opportunities forward in the same way.
Thank you. The next question I've got, I'm going to direct to you, Corey. What do you see as the primary benefits of biologicals versus synthetics?
Well, I think there's quite a few advantages, and there's probably obviously some disadvantages as well. I guess I'll start out by saying I don't see a world where there's all biologicals or all synthetic chemistries in the future. It's going to be a combination, I think, of all the tools that the grower has available to them to make a good return on investment and a wider range of tools. But biologicals, I think there's a few things that really fit well with biologicals. The first is from an integrated pest management standpoint and resistance or residue management. That's where we see probably the largest use on fruits and vegetables today. If you have a 5-spray program to finish out the year and you want to be 100% residue free, you might start with your synthetics, get the population under control, and finish with a biologic. That's pretty common. That's been happening for years, and I see that only becoming more and more effective as the science meets more effective biologicals, biocontrols in this case. Lisa mentioned earlier, I think, a really exciting area around nutrient use efficiency or nutrient fixation, offsetting synthetic use of fertilizers as well. So I think what we have is a scenario where science is making the biologicals more effective, and therefore they fit better in whether it be resistance management, whether it be in an integrated pest management system, offsetting just the full reliance on synthetics. So I think it's more about opening the box of technology opportunities. And my other 15,000 colleagues who wake up every day thinking about synthetic chemistry, I always make fun of them a little bit. I'm like, you have one answer to everything, and it's more chemistry, right? When you look at biologicals, you really open yourself up to peptides, to microbials, to enzymes, to botanicals. And frankly, we're just starting to open the box on what these technologies can do for us. So I think it's really exciting. I think we're really on the front end of it. And it's science unleashing this, and that a lot of capital is finding these markets in the right science. So it's really, I think we're on the front end, some really exciting times for biologicals in the future.
Very good, thank you. Jason, another one for you. Biologicals have historically been lower or slower in efficacy and performance. Is that still the case, and if so, why? And if not, why not?
So I know biologicals is in your title here, and you guys have some of the best ones, but they are still far behind the technologies that enable the green revolution, very far behind them. Looking at a lot of stuff we did and a lot of data, we put a lot of money into finding these transformational biologicals, and we weren't able to really find them, but we found that there are good modes of action. There's good technologies in here that can move and change the world. But today we're not there. That doesn't mean there's good biologicals and they can be used the right way and used in smarter ways. Corey, you mentioned IPM, IRM, things like that. So we're getting better, we're getting smarter. But a lot of the technologies that make up the vast amount of biological products today are over 30 years old, core technologies, even 100 years old. And so we've got to take that next step. If I stop there, it'd be pessimistic and then get rid of your stock. All of us quit, but I don't think that that's the future. I think I'm very confident that we're heading in the right direction, raising the bar. Some of the stuff you guys are doing with gene editing is going to move the needle. Pulling the technologies out of these microbes, again, that's going to get to the definition that you mentioned, Amy. How do we define these things as we raise the bar? So right now, I don't think we're there. I think we have a long way to go. I think we're getting better. We're getting smarter. Cooperation of ag chem helping us position it, startups, willing to take some chances, all coming together, regulatory bodies. So I think we'll get there, but I think we have a long way to go.
I guess I would ask the question, though. It feels like there's the right direction of momentum, right? It's not just companies that have biologicals that are pushing uphill. It's actually a pull that's a lot stronger from the market. And I think the increased amount of capital, as you mentioned, Corey, going into this market, it bodes well for the innovation to happen, right?
Yeah.
We are 100% biologicals, but I would not sit up here and say that our products are the solutions and tools for everything. Our products should be a part of an integrated pest management program that leverages biologicals in all of its forms, in addition to synthetic chemistries as needed. So I think, but it's the right moment for it. That's the momentum I feel.
No, I agree. I mean, I think in 2022, $1 billion was put into it. And so that's what's going to move the needle is science. And identifying the things that work, how to make them work, where they don't work as important as where they work. So like I'm sitting up here today because I believe in it. I would not sit up here if I didn't believe in biologicals in the future. I just believe that there's more that's going to take to get there. And so I am an optimist when it comes to biologicals, even though sometimes I sound like a traitor.
I'd like to add something too. I mean, I think a lot of the comparisons we're looking at where they say they're not as good is we're comparing to something that already exists. And so it's just a different way to do something that's already been solved for, which is great, but it's not the whole answer. And so if I use our company and even other discoveries that we're seeing out there, it's really about using biologicals to actually do something different. So I think there'll be a great space to do the same, and I think eventually it'll get better so it does the same as well, or a great complement. But I think the real future and the excitement is, what are we going to find that's different, that hasn't been solved by all our chemical friends who have been trying to solve something, or maybe haven't even tried to solve some of those particular issues that I think we'll be able to do with biologicals.
Have the potential to not only get a control claim or more of a pest control claim, you potentially can get the nutrition or the stimulant as a combination. Okay.
Yeah, and I might just build onto the $1 billion of annual investment that's coming into biologicals. I mean, that's a large sum of capital, finding unique and probably different science than what a traditional company has. So, you know, this invented here, I think all the companies that we'd worked with or have come from, they spend a lot of time on inventing everything inside. And what I see with biologicals is a lot more collaborative approach with outside capital coming in. There's a lot of very interested outside capital coming in and finding the science. So we have the opportunity, I think we look at over 500 different technologies, unique technologies a year that come through the door and we take a closer look at. And this isn't something you're going to see in 2 years or 3 years. This is 5 to 10 years down the road. There is some really, really efficacious and really exciting technologies that are in the pipelines of not only our companies, but a lot of the other smaller startup companies out there. And I know there's a few here today too. But that's really exciting science and would never find the light of day without the model, I think, that we're setting up for biologicals.
Thank you all. That was good the way you played off of each other. My next question's for Lisa. We've heard some skepticism, and we've already talked about it here in the panel, and mixed results from some biologicals. Can you tell us how your company is helping to improve the sector's credibility?
Sure. You know, as I said, I think biologicals can also solve new problems, not just existing ones that we've solved in other ways. And so as we think about what that looks like, we know there's a lot of pressure and a lot of scrutiny that will come to a company or a product that's first of its kind in the market. And so what we think is really important is transparency with the farmer. So again, because there has been some doubt or some skepticism, some concerns from some products maybe in the past, we partner with third parties, we partner with universities, Iowa State, U of I, University of Illinois, Purdue, North Carolina State University, University of Georgia, a whole list of universities, because we know in agriculture, farmers like to hear what their local university has to say. So we partner with universities and other third parties to do thorough testing of the product, and then we publish those results on our website so that farmers can see, hopefully, something that's close to them, and understand what that product looks like and what it would do. And we really think it's that kind of transparency that's going to be important, whether it's us or anybody else in this space, that we're putting that data out there, having the data run, and making sure that everything's being thoroughly tested, and so farmers know what to expect when they buy the product.
Yeah, thank you. Next, I've got one for you, Corey. Where do biochemicals fit in the picture relative to biologicals and synthetics?
Yeah, I think the easy answer is somewhere in between. So I think on one end you have microbials, and you have really core natural occurring products that would qualify as biologicals. Then on the other side you have synthetic. And I think along this continuum you do have a lot of different technologies that are kind of in the middle. And what I mean by in the middle is I'm thinking things like peptides, enzymes, natural products, coppers. There's a lot of products along that continuum. And I think there's two axis of it. One is about the effectiveness of it, and can it be developed into something that's going to have a good return on the investment for the grower and bring more just a better product. And I think the other side is from a regulatory standpoint. How does that look? So it ties a little bit into your biological and organic question earlier. I think it will open the opportunity to bring better technologies through a regular, because they are lower risk. It's not because there's trying to work around regulatory, but I think because they're lower risk compounds than chemistry, they will find their way into the market a little more effectively. So I do see in our pipeline and of what we see coming in from around the globe, a lot more biochemicals, a lot more science really unlocking biochemicals in different ways. We've just announced some early partnerships with Biotelis, for example, in Belgium, that's really doing a lot of work in this area, mostly in peptides. We have an RNAi program, or had an RNAi program that we're mostly outsourcing now. So there's a lot of different approaches to these different technologies and biochemistries. I think it's exciting. I think it opens up new doors that we might not have available to us in the past.
Thank you. Amy, where do macroorganisms fit into the picture?
So we were joking about the names and what the nomenclature is and what fits in where, and I actually went back to Mike about this question, saying, I just want to make sure you do mean beneficial insects, and there's not another category that I'm not yet up to speed on. So while Certis Biologicals does not actually play in this space, and for those of you not as familiar with macroorganisms, are your beneficial insects. So it could be your pollinators, bees, butterflies, or it could be your predators, those that are going to provide some kill, so wasps, flies, nematodes, et cetera. And so this is oftentimes positioned as an alternative to chemicals. Frankly, I think we look at it as it's another tool in the toolbox. I know it's sounding maybe a bit redundant, but we believe that you can actually combine microbials with your beneficial insects in addition to synthetics where necessary. And so especially in something like a CEA environment, a controlled environment ag, there's varying degrees of regulatory structure around beneficials, and I think that's probably something that needs to be cleaned up a little bit. In some cases, it's incredibly strict. In some cases, it's just, okay, if it doesn't do any harm, you're good to go. And in other regions and countries, there's no registration, or there's no regulatory framework at all. So it's one that as everything starts to get defined and categorized maybe a little bit more universally, then that regulatory framework has to fall in behind.
Thank you. Lisa, so now biostimulants, including bionutrition, nutrient use efficiency, have recently proliferated both in number as well as grown in size. Why is that?
Well, I would say right now, if you think about innovation, it's increasing so rapidly. And what's really exciting about it is we're innovating so rapidly, we're starting to meet some of the needs of agriculture. And so as we think about what are those needs, right, we've got to be able to produce more, but we've got to do it more sustainably. And as you think about whether it's the number of products, the type of biologicals gaining in popularity, it's because these are the products that really can bring solutions to farmers to not only help them be more productive, increase their ROI, but also help them do it in a more sustainable manner. And it's really cool if you think about where we're at right now. While we're innovating, we sort of have technology, biology, and demand, which sometimes hasn't always been there necessarily, coming together at the same time. So we have the science that really is letting us kind of solve these problems, and we also have demand from farmers who are really saying, hey, I want tools, I need more tools than I've had in the past to be able to farm better. And better could mean higher ROI, better could mean more sustainably, depending on the farmer, it better means something different. But I think people are starting to see that biologicals can play a very different role than maybe how they saw them playing in the past, and seeing a lot more successes and really being able to utilize them in different manners on their farm. And I think that's just going to continue as we look at the investment we talked about. We look at the players that are in it. It's not just a handful of people, it's a lot of people trying to find these solutions. And so I think it's going to even progress more rapidly.
Thank you. Amy, is a pure play biological company likely to emerge with 20% or more market share, and be the market leader?
I mean, that's our target, so yes. No. When you look at the dynamics today, you look at the investment, as we talked about, you looked at the pull-through in demand, and you look at how innovation is evolving, whether it's fine-tuning the microbe, whether it's extracting what the microbe does and doing it semi-synthetically, or whether it's increased formulation technology. I think there is the possibility for a pure-play biological company to have that type of share.
Yeah, and I might just add a little onto that. These are global numbers. This isn't just U.S., but you have to add up 16 companies, biological companies, to come up with 30% of the market. Mm-hmm. And it's 1,000 companies that make up the whole biologicals, 5-6 billion, whatever you call the market today. So the fragmentation of this market and the localization of this market is really, extreme. So I think the opportunity for better science and for more consistent science, and I guess market share is important. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, there's enough room for all of us to grow the pie out there in a more scientific way, providing a better product for the grower to have a better return on investment. And I think that's the real opportunity in it, rather than a market share play. That's obviously important, but there's a lot of just fragmentation in the marketplace that sometimes when you talk to growers about biologicals, it's like, well, you're the 12th person hit my door today, right? So this whole opportunity to bring a more scientific, a better return on investment, more consistent product to the grower, I think is really our opportunity in the short term and long term.
And I think for pure play, go ahead, Amy. Just for the companies that are wholly focused on it, pure play companies, when we see larger companies coming into the marketplace, we see that as a plus, right? It's the old comment of a rising tide lifts all boats. We're looking at this from the standpoint of, if we would want to compete at the farm gate or discuss our technologies with growers or with PCAs here in California or with retail reps and distributors, we're bringing a scientific message, right? Now, we're bringing the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of field trials and the data and getting the registrations and trying to fit within these legal frameworks. And so we want other companies to do the same. And we know that the likes of the larger companies, such as your own, are going to bring that. And that's a benefit. That's a major benefit for growers.
I would say I don't think it's not only possible, I think it's needed that we have somebody like that, whether it's your company or it will be your company. And,
why not? Why not?
And to Corey and what they're doing, kind of keeping it as is and letting it run its own thing, because biologicals need to be sold a different way. To your point, Lisa, they're different, they're new. So I think it's needed. If you look back, I think where we're at now, if you look back at the pharma, when the Genentechs and all that started, I think that's where we are now. That's the type of technology that's going in. That's why you see $1 billion. You're going to see companies such as yourselves and deliver this necessary biological pure play. So I think we look out 5-10 years and you're going to look back, wow, this was the time.
I just want to hit on one quick thing that you mentioned about they're sold differently, because I'm not suggesting that biologicals in every way are exactly the same as a synthetic chemistry. They are different. They're going to deliver a different value proposition and at times a different percentage of control. However, there's also this hurdle where there are a lot of people out there that don't necessarily know how to sell or position biologicals, so they're not necessarily always given the best first step. And there's oftentimes a memory of, sure, I tried those products when they first came out 10 years ago, 7 years ago, 5 years ago, and Pam Marone and I have had this conversation before, those products have been through 5 and 6 different formulation adjustments since then. And so they've increased in efficacy, they've increased in storage stability, they've increased in their ability to last on the plant. So there is an opportunity to take a second look. And if you don't have either pure play or at least a carve out or a focused organization of salespeople, of agronomists, of technicians, it's not always going to be positioned in the way to make it most effective.
Thanks. Jason, next one's for you. What's the largest limiting factor to biological adoption?
You know, I'll say efficacy, of course, but it's not just efficacy. You actually just touched on some of these things: formulation, upscaling, and Corey, where this leads me is to a company you mentioned, this company Biotalis, and people ask, well, who are your competitors? And I say, well, I don't really think of it as competition because we're all kind of in it together. What can we each do to solve the issues of upscaling, get the right cost right? That's what we're doing with Biotalis, but you're a company that can take it to market. We all come together. Stability, shelf stability, there's lots of reasons why they're not yet where they are. Again, to your point, Lisa, they're different here. So it's not just efficacy, although that's a big part of it.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to turn over to our Slido questions, and I'm not going to direct this to a specific individual, so I'm looking to one of you to want to raise your hand. So what do you wish for in terms of international standards for registering biologicals?
I dream that the European regulatory system will be fast someday, or somewhat fast, or not painfully, deadly slow. Every night I wake up dreaming about that, or every night I go to bed dreaming about that.
I would just build on that. The conversation you had about California earlier, about big idealistic objectives without a regulatory framework. Europe's it's got the same problem times 1,000, right? So Farm to Fork has all these really idealistic targets, which I think are very bold and very ambitious, but the regulatory framework behind it is really going to be challenging to deliver on it. So we, with actually the cooperation of a lot of the friends on stage here, we've created some coalitions where we're speaking more as one voice and getting in the right doors at the European Union and really having the right conversation with the authorities. But that one's going to be a long haul. The second one, we talk a lot about biopesticides, but the whole biostimulant side of this business is really interesting as well. And from a regulatory standpoint, there's starting to be a little bit of consistency. I know there's in the Farm Bill that was spoke about earlier, there's going to be a provision in there for biostimulants and the way they will be regulated in the future. Brazil's just done something similar. India's done something similar. Europe did it maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So we're starting to get some consistency, but on biostimulants more so. But biocontrols, I still think we have a long ways to go, specifically in Europe.
You look at what Brazil did versus Europe. Europe's talking about it, and Brazil's talking about it, but Brazil did it.
Brazil just did it. They were like, okay.
It can be done.
Yeah. I don't know if it can be done there in that setting
because of the different countries.
Exactly, and I think even if you want it to go faster, they've got all these ideas about taking all these materials out of the marketplace, but they just now extended the approval deadlines for another 40 active ingredients. So they're not going in the right direction.
This next question's also got a government focus. So what is and what should be the role of federal government in helping advance biologicals to commercial viability and scale?
I mean, I think we just talked about a case where a government can play a very positive role by bringing technologies faster to market by actually enabling it, not just talking about it. We see that by the Brazilian government. I think the governments do have a place where they need to make sure what we're doing is safe and setting the right safety standards. I think that that's important. You can somehow try to police yourself, but safety is something that I think needs to be done somewhat at the government level.
I would agree. I think safety standards is the key, and consistency across that. And I think the low hurdle lets a lot of products, a lot of technologies get in that might be registered as a biostimulant, but has biocontrol utilization. And so you got to get the rules of the game squared up first. I think governments can help that, and then put the right level of hurdles in from really a safety perspective, so the grower can have a good return on what the investment that they're making.
When I think the framework and the rules are one thing, but they have to have the employees that understand those technologies, because a lot of them are coming from traditional synthetic pesticide parts of the government and don't necessarily have the biological experience or background to be able to make these assessments. Nor do I. It's not pointing the fingers, but it needs to change.
I think from a support perspective, they've done some things with some grants that are out there, especially that are where we're more focused on the fertilizer piece. Grants for development, manufacturing, really essentially, growing fertilizer here, not relying on it to come from some other country through some supply chain that maybe is or isn't working. But the other piece is also in the Farm Bill. So as you look at different language in the Farm Bill and you look at the conservation portions, there are some opportunities without having to add new programs, but instead just slightly changing the language, actually, that would include many of these products we're talking about that the Farm Bill would support, and which would also help encourage farmers to try something that they might still be thinking, well, I tried it 7 years ago and it didn't work, kind of a thing. So I think you've got the regulatory piece, you certainly have the safety piece, but then I think there are also some things that from a U.S. perspective we can do to help actually support the growth of these technologies as well.
Terrific. This next question came from California, and I think it's appropriate to answer it, but I'd also like to suggest we think about it a little more broadly. The question is, how do we convince PCAs of the benefit, as well as how to apply biologicals in conventional production? And I think the expansion on that is just thinking about the importance of really some grower hand-holding to assure that these products get used right at the right time, right rate, et cetera.
Yeah, I can start. I'm not a PCA or a California expert, so I'll just be first clear about that. But I'll just speak more about the way that we've chosen to look at this. And it's been mentioned, it's a different selling process. It's a different value proposition. And our entire team, commercial and actually from development, commercial, is all dedicated to biologicals. And because there's a strong belief that I have, and I think the rest of our team has, that consultative selling is so much more important. You can't just show up, here's a product, it's going to do this, and 90% of the time, I'll be back next year. This is really a deeply intense consultative conversation that you have to have with that grower, that you have to have with maybe even the reseller, and building the capabilities of understanding how the product works, under what situations it works, what other situations it doesn't work, and what did you learn about that product you can apply to using it the next year in whatever regime. So the intensity and the consultative nature of that grower interaction is so different with biologicals, to the point where we have a separate team, a separate dedicated team that are very highly agronomically skilled to have those conversations, because it's not a sell and run and come back next year. It's really, you got to be there, remain on the farm.
It's also not a drop-in replacement. So you're not just coming to them and saying, here's my biological product called A, just replace whatever diamide you're using, or just replace whatever organophosphate you're using. You have to run through what is the program management for that crop, and where do the biologicals fit in terms of timing and application and so forth and so on. I think it's all of the things that Corey said, but it's even how they're stored. So I think they don't necessarily have to worry about that with synthetics, and they can just stick it in with the rest of their other chemical handling. There are products still on the market that require refrigeration or even freezing, and so that adds another layer of complexity that needs to be trained on.
This next question, it could be kind of deep here. It's, what are some of the unintended consequences about biologicals that policymakers and regulators need to be keeping in mind?
Tap back into my old lawyer personality. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they're always unintended. Sometimes they actually are intended with respect to biologicals. I think there's an educational element that's still missing, that all of us can be a part of, and that's why most of us are here. We're trying to educate. So I think a lot of that is just more education, getting in front of people, and transparency as to what's actually happening. That's probably the best way I would answer it as a lawyer. And it depends.
Yeah, it always depends. And I would say the challenge with biologicals is when you say biologicals, people automatically associate safety and low risk, and that is not always the case. I mean, when you're dealing with the types of technologies and everything that can become a part of that technology, it's not always safe and it's not always low risk. So there's a lot of science that needs to be done in order to make sure that these products are doing what they say and doing it in a safe and effective way. So I think one of the misconceptions is biologicals are always safe. That's certainly not the case.
And through a pandemic where we see what a biological can do if it's not handled the right way.
I love this next question. It's how can growers, and presuming these are growers who have not had experience with biologicals yet, how can growers cut through the technical jargon surrounding biologicals and decide which products are most effective?
Might be a simple answer because we have one product that does one thing, right? So, but it really does come down to the sellers. And, you know, it comes down to, it is a different selling proposition. It is a different conversation. It is much more prescriptive, at least for our product. It's not just simply a replace. It starts with the concept and the conversation of replace, but then what about? You know, what are my soils? You know, what am I trying to achieve from a yield perspective, so on and so forth. Not dissimilar to other conversations you would have as you're thinking about other inputs. But it's not just so straightforward. You get it off the shelf and just go use it and assume you know exactly how it's going to work. Like some old chemistry, right? I know if I use a quart, I'm going to kill this much. If I use a quart and a half, I'm going to get these weeds that are a little bigger. If I use 2 quarts, Katie bar the door, I'm good for the year, right? So it's just not the same. But your seller has to recognize that as well when they talk to that farmer. Because if they don't, you'll be disappointed. It's just a guarantee because you haven't used the product the way it's going to work the best on your farm.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Corey.
I'll add one thing, and this is a little bit of learning from looking at multiple different technologies, you know, per year. Show me the data. It's usually, I mean, I get these great pictures of here it is with and without, and pictures are nice and believable, but show me the data. And if I'm a grower, I'm going to say, show me the data to believe why I should make this investment on my farm of the limited resources I have available. And the other thing that I really noticed is growers will do, the more progressive adopters of biologicals will do on-farm trialing for themselves and really prove it to themselves first. And we see the biggest growth is penetrate on the farm that first time to test, and then you'll grow on-farm. And that seems to be a very common trend in the adoption of biologicals, both biostimulants and biocontrols.
Of course, you don't want another picture of root dig showing the big roots and look how great our products are.
Little root?
I've got a whole life.
I do
But
like
I think
them.
I think you're right, Lisa, and I'm actually impressed with the model you guys have done with the really focusing on the technical sales. It's not so much also putting the burden on the grower, and it is data, but the burden on the person selling the biological to explain what you're about to experience and what you're not going to experience.
Good point. Here's I think a very interesting question. So what is an entry-level biological practice or product that tree nut growers could adopt? So I'm assuming the question's from a tree nut grower who hasn't been using biologicals. He's wondering how he can get started.
I mean, there's a lot of great biocontrol products that I think have a place there now, and even better ones coming, as I've made that point before. So I think there's there to look at that. Nutrition's also an area I think that's up and coming that we'll look at. I think there's not just one answer here. I think you have to sit down with the individual grower, understand what they need, what is the issue, do they have abiotic stress, do they have biotic stress, and tackle it that way.
So here's another one that's about on-farm, I think. It's and I'm going to reword it just a little bit. Who really are the trusted advisors that farmers can get information from beyond the manufacturer?
Just our experience, especially here in California, where the biologicals market is so much more advanced than it is in other parts of the United States, is that most of the distributor retail outlet salespeople have a lot of experience with biologicals. You won't necessarily find that in other states in the U.S. like you do here. The other way is if you're talking with the manufacturer's reps, understanding who is representing those products, but calling them directly and reaching out to them directly. You know, we typically, and I think a lot of the other companies do as well, prior to launching a product, we try and get samples of that pre-commercialization product into the hands of our distributors and their agronomists and their technical teams so that they have an opportunity to play with the product and create their own data and their own perception of the product rather than just looking at our root ball pictures and just looking at our graphs. And so, we find that all the distributors here in the California market are pretty aggressive in that, are pretty good in that way.
Yeah, and I'll just build on that. I think we take it upon ourselves to make sure that we are providing the capability and the education and the right technical information. So part of our model, our commercialization model, is something we call BioSquad, which is really a biological from our concept from Filagro, who we acquired 2 years ago. And the idea there, and we do over 600 of these a year, what we call academies, and it's really educational based. It's not product oriented or sales oriented. It's here's the way this product works, here's how it works, here's why it works, here's a consistency. So we do that with, as you mentioned, Amy, with the resellers to assure that they've got the right capability, the right information, the right education, and the right resources so they can get their questions answered as they go throughout the year. So it's a little bit on us to make sure that we're being that trusted advisor out there. And we're not there yet, but we're continuing to invest there.
Is if you can get local data. So trusted advisor, the other farm down the road may be your competitor, but at the same time, they like to see the data from what happened on the farm down the road. So not only are we using universities and third parties, crop consultants, depending on what part of the country you're in, matter. Sometimes state trials. People care about state trials maybe, or they care about what their local seed company trials put in, because a lot of local seed companies will also do biologics as well when they put in their trials. So it's not just about germplasm and yield. But we also find that people look at each other as sort of the expert, and they like to see the data within their county. And so now that takes a lot, right? Because that's a lot of data sets that have to be collected in a lot of counties across the Corn Belt from our point of view. But it definitely helps people look at it much more, they look at it much more believably than if I were just to produce it from, my trials, from our Pivot Bio trials.
Thanks. I've got a question here from Richard Waycott, who those of you who know him know he's a legend in the almond industry. And he's the first person that I've noticed, at least, that identified themselves. All the other questions are anonymous. Anyway, Richard would like to say, how much of the industry is specialty crop focused versus row crop focused?
Yeah, I can start. I don't know about the industry. I can tell you what our portfolio looks like. First of all, we're heavy biostimulants. So I bet you 65-70% of our total portfolio is biostimulants, and about 75% of that goes on, or of our whole biological portfolio go on specialty crops and vegetables. So we're very high in that. We do see the future of expanding more into row crops and adoption, and that's really related to two things. One is getting your cost of goods down to where you can go to broadacre crops. And the second one is the technologies. I'm just using one example in the whole crop pheromone standpoint, right? Pheromones have been used in spec and veg crops for several years and very effectively, but now through synthetic biology, a few companies have found a way to get the cost of goods down to where you can start using it for broadacre pests. So I see more expansion in row crops, but right now it's really concentrated into high value crops.
For us, it's the opposite. We're still starting up, and we're focusing on broad row crops. However, what we do see is this technology is applicable in a lot of places. And now, whether that means we'll take it forward and sell that technology in those specialty crops, or we'll do licensing or something, but we definitely see that the technology that we're looking at is very transferable. As you think about specialty crops, I'm thinking about vegetables specifically, but it's going to take us a while, right? We're still kind of moving through the first big hurdles, but I certainly can see something like that in the horizon.
I haven't seen the shepherd's hook come out yet, but I'm looking at the time and realizing I need to tie this up. So I'd just like to say a special thank you to the panel. I appreciate all their input and their sharing, and would you please give them some acknowledgement for their time?